What is going on, y'all? It is the Caveman back at it again with another video. And as of late, as I've been saying in these past couple of videos I have been making, the NFL is most likely damn near going to go to a 17-game schedule. And, there are a lot of players that are not too happy about it, especially big-name players like Alvin Kamara, Aaron Rodgers, J.J. Watt. A lot of big names, Richard Sherman as well, have come out and, voiced their dislike for the 17-game schedule and why they think it's pretty, hypocritical for the NFL to be caring about player safety yet they want to add a whole other game for the season. They are not big fans of the 17-game schedule, to say the least. And I decided, since we're watching it unfold right before our eyes, let's talk about the pros and the cons behind what is good and what is bad about a 17-game season. I don't think this should take all that long, but there are some things that are worth conversation, and I want to get your opinions on as well. So the 17-game schedule, like I said, a lot of big-name NFL players don't like it, and Alvin Kamara being the latest one to voice his dislike for it, he is just not a fan at all. He's actually been on Twitter just kind of ranting about it over these past couple days. He does not like it in the least bit. And I don't blame him because, it definitely is true. Richard Sherman made the point originally, I believe. It's very hypocritical for the NFL to be preaching player safety, yet they want to add a whole nother football game to the season, which is already adding a whole nother element of potential injuries that could happen to many different players. It is very hypocritical. I have to agree with the players on that one. So obviously the first and most obvious con is the fact that there is a lot more injury potential when you add another game to the season. There's already 16 games. They already go through a whole bunch of punishment throughout the regular season. Just adding a whole nother game obviously is just adding a whole nother chance for players to get injured and a whole nother week of practice for players to get injured. And obviously that's the most obvious number one con with the 17-game season is the injury potential that comes with it. The second biggest negative, in my personal opinion, is the fact that this will screw with all record books that have been set up to this point. Now it's going to be the 17-game schedule era. From this point forward, any record that is set will be in the 17-game schedule era, and this is going to be a big division point between, records that were set previously and records that were set now. And I just feel like that's unnecessary. I just feel like it screws with the record book so much. And if I were a player that broke a record in like the 17th game, I'd feel like it just wasn't as meaningful. I don't know. There's just something that rubs me the wrong way about breaking a record when you have an extra chance to do so. And I'm sure that rubs the players the wrong way as well. I'm sure it's the same kind of feeling. It wouldn't sit with me well knowing that I broke like a passing record, let's say, but I had an extra game to do so and I also crushed his record. It wouldn't like sit with me knowing that I had a whole nother game to do so when the player that had it originally only had one less game. I don't know. That's just how I personally feel about it. That is a big negative in my personal opinion. The next negative about a 17-game schedule is the fact that now that you have an odd number of games in the season, you have to justify to half of the teams in the NFL why you get one less home game than the other half of the teams. There will be an odd number of games, therefore not every team will have the same amount of home and away games. How is that fair? How is that something that's fair to teams? Because places like Buffalo, places like Seattle, you have an absolute advantage when you are at home field. Obviously, when fans are there weren't fans in 2020, but when fans are in the stadium, there is an obvious advantage to the home side. And how is that fair to teams that have to play one extra away game in comparison to one extra home game? We'll see how they balance that out. We'll see what they do about that, because I definitely think that is a major issue they're going to have to address. I can't imagine they're just going to let half of the teams have one less home game. I can't imagine that's their plan. I'm sure they have some sort of plan to fix that, but nevertheless, that is certainly going to be an issue on their plate if they're implementing the 17-game season. The last negative I have written down is that the NFL has finally gotten to the point where they feel it's necessary to expand the NFL season. This has been a topic that has been talked about for 10 years now. I remember this conversation expanding way back to like 2011, 2010. This is something that people have been talking about for a very long time. I found plenty of articles from, 10 years ago that were talking about this very topic, and now they've gotten to the point where they are expanding the schedule. So once you go to 17 games, I can't imagine that the NFL, as greedy as they are going to go back to 16 games. So once they get to the point where they feel like they want more money again, they're just going to go to 18 games, and that's going to be even worse. So at this point, once you go to 17 games, you're going to go to 18 games, and then who knows where you go from there. Who knows if they continue to expand the season. This is something that will continuously grow, and you'll never go back to a 16-game season once a 17-game season is implemented. So hopefully I'm wrong, but, to me, this just seems like it will become, kind of a snowball effect. The NFL will probably like going to 17 games because they're going to make more money, and then, maybe 5, 10, 15 years from now, they will go to 18 games, and then it'll just kind of continuously roll into a snowball, and that's only going to get worse and worse for the players, and I'm sure they're just it's just going to create more and more issues as this ball continues to roll, because the NFL is going to realize, hell yeah, it's making them a lot more money. Although I'd be lying if I was sitting here and saying that I wouldn't be, somewhat of a fan of a longer season. I'm a fan, all right? I watch the football games. I don't have to participate in them, and that doesn't mean I can't have empathy for the players that have to put their bodies on the line week in and week out. And I understand they're making millions and millions of dollars, but still, that's still a decent amount of punishment to be putting your body through on a week-to-week basis. But I'd be lying to you if I was saying that I wasn't looking forward to having more football. Football season is the best part of the year for me personally. There's no better time. I love watching football every Sunday from 9 a.m. sometimes to 11 p.m. whenever they have games in the morning. I love watching football no matter what time it is. I will watch football for hours upon hours upon hours on end, and I'm a huge fantasy player. I love football. I cannot get enough football. Obviously, that is the biggest pro. It's the biggest positive, especially from a fan standpoint. The NFL wants to expand the season because they know people like me will eat this kind of shit up. People that are football fanatics that just absolutely cannot get enough football will watch, and they will love every second of it, and it's just making them more money. And obviously, that's the biggest positive if you want to look at it from a fan standpoint. More football is just a good thing. How do you get around more football? Like I just briefly mentioned, more football means more fantasy football. I cannot get enough of fantasy football. I just played in 7 leagues this past season. 7 fantasy football leagues. That's ridiculous, I know, but I love it. I cannot get enough of fantasy football. And, more football means more fantasy football. How am I going to complain about that? Let's be real here. I'm a fan. I'm going to be honest. I cannot complain about that. But the other positive that is not really being talked about is that half of the NFL, maybe they don't want this 17-game schedule, but the other half of the NFL, the guys that are, maybe on the practice squad, the guys that are really not necessarily the bigger names in the league, they would benefit from this because the more money that's brought into the league means more money for their contract. Guys that are on the practice squad that are making millions upon millions of dollars a year, like Alvin Kamara, Aaron Rodgers, J.J. Watt, they would be getting, a lot more money than they usually would, probably double their money. And that is important to guys that aren't getting as much money as, the superstars. I know players like Malcolm Jenkins and Nate Solder, when I was doing research on this subject, were, being advocates for these practice squad players, for their players that aren't superstars, that aren't getting as much money. They were kind of advocating for the 17-game season because they were advocating for those players that don't necessarily have the voice and the platform that all these superstars have. Because I would imagine that, if you're a practice squad player, you're not making, millions upon millions of dollars. You want to get as much money in the league you can. You've worked to this point. You want to be able to get as much out of it as you possibly can to be able to support your family, support yourself, etc., etc. You want to get as much money as you can. And more football, if that means more money, I'm sure guys that don't get that much money would be all for this. And honestly, that's where I found, all the superstars being a little bit hypocritical. I understand where they're coming from, where, the NFL is sitting there saying they want to care about player safety, yet they're adding another game to the season. I understand that's hypocritical, but it would also be hypocritical for the NFL players to say, oh, players really aren't in favor of this, because that's just simply not true. Maybe a lot of players, a lot of superstars aren't in favor of it, guys with big platforms, but there are a lot of NFL players that you probably have never talked to, Richard Sherman and Alvin Kamara, that would be all for this because they want more money. They want to be able to get the most out of the league because they will never be getting that kind of playing time like you guys get on a week-to-week basis. They want to be able to get the most out of their situation. So I do think it's not hypocritical, but I do think it's a little wrong for them to, go out there and use their platforms to speak for all NFL players when it's really not all NFL players. Like I said, Nate Solder and Malcolm Jenkins are speaking for a large amount of players that want this season expansion because they want more money. And if I'm not mistaken, I think this NFL season change has to be, kind of proposed to the Players Association. And if they're passing it, then that would mean that more players in the NFL are for it than they are against it. Therefore, when Richard Sherman says things like, oh, NFL players are against it for the majority, that would be a lie because it's being passed by the Players Association. So, like I said, there are a lot more practice squad players and a lot more guys on the depth chart than there are superstars. So those guys are definitely finding this to be important to them. And I don't blame them because if I was in their situation, I would feel the exact same way. And who's to say that these practice squad players aren't working hard to earn, that extra money? These practice squad players and depth chart players, you might not see them on the field week in, week out, but they are definitely working their asses off every single day from, morning to night. They're doing everything they can to possibly get to that starting position, and they're working just as hard as those superstars are just to, go and take the superstar spot. They want the spot just as bad as the next guy, and they're working super hard, so I think they wouldn't mind getting some extra compensation for it. So I talked about my positives and my negatives for the 17-game season, but there was one other point that I have yet to make that changes about the 17-game season. So So obviously you get that extra game. There are 17 games. You no longer can go 8-8. You no longer can have a 500 season. But I just wasn't sure whether or not this was a positive or a negative. I was trying to, kind of read up about it and decide whether or not it was a positive or a negative, but I just could not make up my mind. Is it a good thing that teams can no longer finish at 500? I don't know. I want to know your guys' opinion on it. So to wrap up my final opinion about the 17-game season, I am going to lean more toward a good thing than a bad thing. I think the thing that bothers me the most is the fact that it's going to ruin record books forever. I think this is a really bad thing, honestly. I think it's going to fuck with record books pretty bad. And obviously the injury thing is always a bad thing. You never want to see any players go down at all in the NFL. That's just the worst thing you could possibly see. But coming from a fan standpoint, more football is a good thing. I'm not going to act like it's not a true statement. I love more football. I'm going to watch every game that is on. I want more football. Obviously, that is why the NFL is doing this. They want more money because fans want more football. And that is how it is at the end of the day. You cannot lie about that. And I think the other point that is actually pretty large that people are not really acknowledging is the fact that guys that are working hard behind the scenes that you aren't seeing on the field week in and week out are getting more money. Those practice squad players, those players that are buried on the depth chart, they will be getting paid more money. And honestly, who's to say they don't deserve it? Because they're working just as hard as the next guy to try and work up into their way on the depth chart. So who's to say they don't deserve that extra money either? But anyway, I quickly just want to say thank you so much for 500 subscribers. I haven't even been back into this YouTube thing for a year yet, and I'm already at 500 subscribers. You guys are doing wonders for me. You guys are supporting me a whole bunch, and it means the world to me. You guys motivate me to continue this channel each and every day. You guys commenting down below, anything, just liking the video, just clicking on the video to watch it, it means the world to me. It supports me a whole lot, and it motivates me each and every day to wake up and want to make a video. And I definitely want to do some sort of special video for 500 subscribers. I know my boy Kyle Scott has been commenting for me to do a room tour, quite so often ever since I was around 450. He's been wanting me to do something like this, and I'm finally hitting 500. So if a room tour is something you guys would want to see, I think I'll probably do that first. And then if there's any other ideas you guys may have for the future, maybe, then I can do that as well. I'll probably do the room tour, but if you guys have any other ideas as well, I want to hear them. I for sure would love to do them for the future as well, for future milestones, because I'm never going to stop if you guys continue to support me. So I have future goals to hit bigger milestones, so I really hope you guys stick with me through the whole thing. But once again, thank you so much for 500 subscribers. It means the world to me, but I hope you enjoyed this video specifically, and if you did, please like, subscribe, do all the fun stuff. If you want to hit the bell to be notified when I upload, I would appreciate that. If you want to go over to Twitter, follow me over there, I would appreciate that as well. But I hope to see you in the next one. Peace.